All right. Welcome to another episode of Why This Beer. Join us as we discuss all the things that make our craft beer scene unique and the people that help sculpt these great brews. I'm Aslan Graves of Main Street Brewing, and as always, joined by Darren Benema of Neighborhood Brewing and Yellow Dog Penticton. Today we've got Simon Barna, head brewer of Nelson Brewing, home of the Kootenay's oldest craft brewery and one of BC's. Welcome, Simon.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we normally start this all out with just hearing about what your journey in brewing was.
Yeah.
What's your first exposure? How'd you get in the industry?
Yeah, so I grew up in Kingston, Ontario, and my first real job was at the Kingston Brewing Company when I was 14. Got hired as a dishwasher. But then, I just started bussing tables and then helping out with like all their side things too. So I got to know the brewer pretty well. Brewed a mean root beer, amongst other good ales as well. But it was very old traditional English ale pub. So I kind of got a pretty honest taste for craft beer at a young age, in moderation, of course. But it was a pretty cool job. Every once in a while, I had to go into their little brew house and help him with little projects, and did a lot of the special events with them. I became kind of like the token young kid of the brewery, it seemed. But I don't know. So I kind of grew up in that environment, as well as working in a genetics lab, because my stepdad's a genetics professor, biology professor at Queen's University. So kind of got into a bit of science stuff there. Just basically I was there, another glorified dishwasher. I just had an autoclave and some other tools at my disposal. But so I kind of got that first experience there, but I always had an interest in beer, and kind of more so just the pub atmosphere. I always just genuinely my whole family loved the pub. We just had a genuine pull to the family vibe and the cool old school English pub vibe that could bring, where people celebrate and brings people together. So I always had an attraction to beer and pubs. But I ended up going to school.
The idea of it being like a community space.
Yeah, totally, like a safe community space. But I went to school at Dalhousie for, I was probably the only one in my family, well, not the only one, but that didn't study the sciences. I went in for a degree of arts. I studied international development studies, social anthropology were my double major. I had a big interest in environment science. I was really interested in sustainable development, kind of was my thought. Really wanted to travel, work for NGOs. And I went and did that for a while in East Africa, and worked on some projects, and then had this kind of blitz of is this where I want to go? Where is this the next step? What am I going to do? So took a total pivot and decided that I'd just go traveling with some working holiday visas for a while. So I started off in New Zealand for a year, did a bit of woofing, and then I ended up working and getting a job as a bar manager. I served quite a bit, did a lot of hospitality jobs at university, but I got a job as a bar manager at this brewery. Sorry, it wasn't a brewery. It was actually just a pub, but it was the only pub that served the local brewery in town. So I had a really tight relationship. The brewery was called Wanaka Beer Works. It was the only brewery there at the time. But I really got to know the assistant brewer there quite well. This guy named Paulie. Him and I hit it off really well. So I hung out for a few packaging days and just kind of I think that was the very first time I really got kind of really intrigued about the whole craft beer experience and producing an artisanal drink for people. So I did that for a bit, but then I continued traveling after that for another 2 years. Did a year in Australia, a year in Southeast Asia, kind of road tripped around North America, visiting friends I'd met along traveling. Before moving to Nelson, a really good friend of mine and I cruised through California and Oregon, kind of just on a skateboard tour, checking out different parks, but we hit a lot of craft breweries along the way too. And I really solidified my experience in the Northwest there, how cool the beer scene was, I was blown away with, I spent quite a bit of time in Bend, Oregon, and down in Eureka. I went to
any standout beers.
Well, I mean, I went to the original Deschutes Brew Pub, and it's such a beautiful location, and the beers were so epic. And then Crux Brewery was, just awesome. And so I think those really stood out. Definitely the Deschutes original brew pub location will always stand out. I mean, it's right next to this beautiful natural amphitheater, a river flowing through by it. It's
gorgeous.
Yeah, it's just such a and experience. But I think what really stood out was just like the diversity of beers and how much was going on down there. So when I moved up to Nelson, my goal was to snowboard and move here like many people do for the outdoors. And I went up and applied at the brewery for any job they would have, kind of thing. Handed a resume and didn't hear back from anybody for till about 7 or 8 months later. I was working as a contract wildfire and at a restaurant as well. And I got a call back finally and met with the head brewer at the time, Mike Kelly, and Tessa, who was last on your show, was like the lead brewer, assistant brewer at the time. So I went up there and met them, and we hit it off. And they, Mike liked my eclectic experience, and and hired me. And I hired, I guess the position was a cellar hand. It was all the grunt jobs at the brewery.
When was this?
This was in
what
2013.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
like 11 and a half years ago, I guess, now. And similar to Tessa's story, within a couple months, kind of started brewing there. It was a bit of a steep learning curve, started on defiltration and cellar work and just helping wherever I could. But then, not too long after I left, Tessa moved up to Terrace. So there was another brewer named Claire Haitley there who was awesome. And she kind of, took on the more lead brewer role. And then I was more the brewing a lot more once Tessa left. And Claire was awesome. She went on to Big Rock Brewery for a while. And then I think actually got her master's in psychology and got out of brewing, but she was great to work with. They're both such inspirational women to work for. They worked very hard. Our brewery is very labor intensive, and it's definitely it teaches strong work ethic if working at the Nelson Brewing Company.
Right.
But and I mean,
not the most ergonomic setup, I feel like.
No, it's you heard a little bit about it already, but the building was purpose built as a brewery, but in the late 1800s, where everything back then was gravity fed. And now the Nelson Brewing Company is fighting gravity, so to speak. But it's a pretty cool building, but it's not set up as a very functional production brewery place. But so basically I worked there, and the Nelson Brewing Company has always had a pretty cool model of creating a budget for those who want to get further education. So but after a year there, I started taking brewing courses and took multiple courses through the Nelson Brewing Company, through Siebel and the IBD. And
nice.
I like to joke that eventually I think they just felt like they invested so much in me that they had to make me their head brewer. But I've been doing that now for 6 or 7 years. I've been in that role at the Nelson Brewing Company. So a bit over half my time there.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. It's
Nelson's a place that not a lot of people end up staying and settling down. I feel like it's kind of like a place for a time in people's lives and then onwards elsewhere.
It's a lot of transient people for sure, and a lot of that's the nature of the town. Definitely. I don't know, I mean, I wasn't planning on staying and getting married and getting a house and and having a child and all those things. But I spent one winter there thinking, wow, this is the best winter I've ever had in my life. And then summer arrived, and it was just, it was epic. I couldn't believe the amount of camping and access and outdoor sports. And I've been here now, since 2012, and I feel like I just barely scratched the surface of the area of what there really is to do here. So that's a good sign.
With being in the Kootenays, how does the demographic influence what's popular for the beers you're making, and what people want and crave, and then even just getting ingredients in or getting beer out? You guys got pretty wide distribution.
Good question. I feel like it's changed a lot since I started. 'Cause when we first started, one of the first beers I had my contribution in was the Bent Pole Northwest IPA. It was one of the first recipes that was a team effort where I really wanted to, as well as other people there, really wanted to have a Northwest IPA in the lineup because we were pretty
Yeah.
a lot of English styles still at that point. But yeah, I at the time it was like met with a bit of concern that IPAs weren't the palate of like the
Nelson?
West Kootenay area. I mean, we did have like Paddywhack, one of the oldest IPAs of BC. Like it was up there as probably one of the oldest.
Totally.
But yeah, like we were worried, that our demographic might not want like a new hip Northwest style IPA. And obviously that has changed a lot. IPAs are definitely our hazy pale ales now our number one seller. And so in terms of the demographic, I think as the craft beer industry has boomed and there's, two other breweries in Nelson, the palates are probably pretty or the preference for beer is very similar to kind of anywhere. We have a huge influx of people who've moved here from, Calgary and Vancouver and surrounding area. And yeah, I'd say like we're probably pretty similar to most places in terms of what people want to drink. When you see like the statistics of what sells best, IPAs and lagers do really well.
It's on trend.
Yeah, it seems to line up pretty well with what we're doing. In terms of getting ingredients to the Nelson Brewing Company, it's definitely a strategic, like how we order has to be smart. Shipping is insane. Like we're not close to anything. So yeah, we're just anywhere we can we don't order anything without getting multiple quotes on shipping and figuring it out and trying to sharpen that price up a little bit. Yeah, we have to be really strategic in how we order, and that's one of the reasons had incentive from a very early start to have like grain silos to buy bulk grain,
Right.
situations like that. Yeah, you really have to be cognitive of it. Being like a 1991 brewery, we're lucky to have distribution through the BCL, like fairly good distribution, which is super helpful living here. So like government listings are pretty important to us due to the subsidized distribution aspect of it. But yeah, so that's a part of the model, definitely. But yeah, I mean, that all being said, we still sell the most of our beer within like 100-kilometer radius from the brewery's front step. So yeah.
Sweet. That's rad.
It's incredible to like have kept your local community's attention so well over, that's what, 35 years? Pretty much?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Constantly evolving.
For sure. Yeah, and the town's evolved and you evolve with that. But I think one thing that stayed pretty true, Nelson, there's a lot of support for local, the artisanal scene here is pretty big. So we're lucky that's something still being supported.
Yeah, and there's a couple other breweries in town or in the area now that have popped up over the last few years, and I'm sure that might be seen for some as like a challenge, but also it probably brings in more people that are looking for more local stuff as well.
For sure. Yeah. There's I think beer tourism is a real thing, and people, having more breweries in the area actually typically helps the scenario. Yeah. And I mean, we are a bit production based, so our model's never our room only holds 30 people, so it's not really hard to fill our room. So we're not really competing for seats or feeling that press in that way.
Yeah. Do you guys have a food program there as well, or is it pretty bare bones basic?
Bare bones basic. Yeah. Everything at the brewery is about room and space, which we're very limited on. So a kitchen is not. Yeah, no, we're just snacks. We work with a couple local little places that do snacks, and we sometimes have one-off food things. Like it's Burger Month in Nelson right now, and there's a couple that runs an incredible sandwich spot called The Block here, and they're doing their burger at the Nelson Brewing Company. So, but it's like a slow cooked thing, and that they can bring up in crock pots, and it's incredible. But yeah, it's even watching them try to serve with our bartenders behind the bar, though, I'm like, I feel bad for all of you. This is very cramped.
Yeah. It's tight.
Yeah.
Burger Month. That sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
So that's all across Nelson right now?
Yeah, I think it's all the West Kootenays it's grown, and it's they took our slowest hospitality month, made it one of the busiest months in the Kootenays. So
Oh,
it really like
awesome.
helped
That's
knock that
incredible.
shoulder season
Yeah.
out. So yeah, it's a really good movement. People get really serious. I think I can't remember how many burgers there are, but it's like 60-ish burgers you can go try at different places.
Wow.
That's cool.
That's
Yeah,
sweet.
it's pretty hardcore
Like
if you
that
try
idea.
to hit them all.
What's the most outlandish burger you've got?
I mean, what surprises me is just like the size of some of them, but like, yeah, there's some pretty big.
No.
Most outlandish burger. I don't know. Yeah, that's a great question. I'm gonna have to get back to you on that one.
Sorry, that
No
wasn't in the
kangaroo
pre-question
burgers
list.
yet?
Yeah, no. And what comes to mind is like I haven't had it yet, but the burger that they're serving at the NBC looks delicious, but it's like totally it's out there. It's got like an egg toasted in the bun. It's like this chopped lamb
Oh,
that's like
man.
stewed in our Blackheart stout, and it has like a bechamel sauce served on top of it, and pickles and like sliced honey ham. It looks incredible, but it's like
Oh man.
So is that like a fork and knife burger then?
I'd say so. It's definitely not date night burger.
Yeah, not first date.
No,
at
yeah,
least.
true. For sure.
Yeah.
Right, that's a good idea.
So we haven't talked about the beer we're drinking yet.
Right.
But Nelson Faceplant. This is literally probably I remember being in the Grand Forks outside the Grand Forks liquor store, probably asking people to buy the beer for me when I was underage. This is my intro to craft beer. This
Nice.
is yeah. But kind of excited to talk about this beer, how it's changed over the years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Faceplant Winter Ale for those that haven't had it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've had it actually.
I would say this is one of the like a lot of the legacy brands in the Nelson Brewing Company have unfortunately have like gone away just due to lack of sales. But this one has held strong for us over the years. It's yeah, like it definitely precedes me so by at least 5 or 6 years. It was originally brewed for Whitewater Ski Hill as like a limited offer up there
Nice.
that kind of stuck around. Yeah, I mean, I remember when I started at the brewery, it seemed like there was a lot of like winter warmers locally on the shelves you could find.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of them anymore. I know some.
How sounds
No, it's
What is
true.
it?
There's like a lot less, or maybe I'm not looking for them, so
Right.
maybe that's the thing too. Sometimes they're still there, or they don't make as much of it anymore as they
Yeah.
used to. Maybe.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that stood apart for me is a lot of the ones back like were then I was trying were like a lot of them were spiced winter ales. You know,
Right.
there was a lot of that like clove, nutmeg, cinnamon kind of thing happening, and a lot of them are quite more like higher ABV, boozier than this one is. I'd say this one's a bit lower
yeah.
on the end for the stout, 6%. And I know the original concept of this beer was to make it a more like sessionable winter ale, not to be like spiced or too boozy, something that was a bit, more repeatable, more sessionable. Yeah, so that
Yeah.
was kind of the original concept. Make a winter warmer, which isn't, I guess, a style of beer. It's just a term people use to describe beer. I think they're more like based off of, the old ale or like strong British ale category would be like the closest beer category to this. But this beer, yeah, it's like had a really big following, especially with the ski scene in Nelson. There's like a ski
Right.
run at Whitewater named after it, which is cool.
Sweet.
Yeah, it's used to be like, you'd see it, you still do at like all the snow. We get a lot of snowboard and ski premieres here in Nelson that tour through, and you'd always, Faceplant would be getting cracked at all those. And yeah, it was like
Yeah.
has definitely a cool following here on multiple demographics, like kind of older to younger people. So I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean,
Nice. And so it's a pretty rich, dark beer. Like we've obviously high amount of
Right.
caramel malt. It's kind of like what what's kind of what's your, are you using Maris Otter as a base? Is it pale malt,
Yeah, so the
specialty?
base is two-row pale.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty simple grain bill. Like it's pretty high on crystal, like C60 malt, two-row pale, and honestly has like a couple handfuls of Carafa Special 2, a handful of roast barley. It has a decent amount of like blackstrap molasses.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, which I think actually gives it quite a bit of that like rich, full sweetness that's in there. Yeah, brewing with, it used to have brown sugar in it as well. The recipe's been tweaked quite a bit over the time, but also a lot to do with the brewing techniques. The goal of this beer was to finish with a bit of body, like we aim for 3 to 3.5 Plato final gravity on this beer. But we used to have issues with it drying out quite a bit back in the day. So the brewers and I cut the brown sugar out of the recipe and added more molasses, which actually was like, we trialed that like conservatively because, molasses has a high iron content that can be oxidized. So we were cautious about using too much molasses, but finding
Right.
a decent volume. But yeah, so we took out the brown sugar and, we do have a new hot liquor tank now, but one of the issues with the brewery back in the day was our hot liquor tank was a bit undersized and the way we heat water was pretty interesting. A lot of work, but not too far off of some breweries have to do, but like heating water in the kettle and transferring it over to holding tanks and that sort of thing. But even before we got the new hot water tank, one of the things that really helped this beer was preheating the mash tun, which might sound like a simple concept, but wasn't really being done at the time. And it really just, I think there was a fear that maybe the foundation water would be too hot because we didn't have enough hot water. So the water we preheated with, we'd keep in the mash tun. We didn't drain it. But yeah, it really just, made for way more consistent mash temperatures. We have a pretty old isothermal mash tun, no rakes or knives, bit of a narrow design for a mash tun.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, preheating's been a game changer of like keeping that attenuation a little bit lower and hitting those gravities that we wanted.
Yeah. Are you mashing hotter then at that point?
Yeah, like we were mashing.
What are you targeting?
Like we were aiming for 67 Celsius mash temp usually, but we did try aiming a bit higher. But it seemed that the like variability was in, we'd be like hitting our temperature probe and we're like, cool, we're like 72 in the front, 59 in the back. Like it was like pretty whereas when we started preheating the mash tun, we like that range like narrowed to like 2 degrees variance from different places. Right. So it really made a difference. So we were like playing with that game and not wanting to, cook the enzymes at too hot of a temperature and maintain body at the end of the beer. So yeah. So that was a bit of a game changer for the consistency of this beer, as simple as that is. But yeah, the grain bill, just a bit of Magnum for bittering. Our lead brewer always describes as like he gets the nose of cherry cola on it, which ever since he said it, it's kind of stuck in my head. That. But
kind of looks like it too. Mm-hmm. So that helps. It's like kind of a nice dark brown, right?
For sure. Things have tweaked over, like just the roast barley we used over the years to what we use now. Like we use a really, really dark roasty roast barley in it. And we're barely using much roast barley. It's like just about 1% of the grain bill, but it comes through quite, then the concept of that is kind of like gives it that bit of like the drying finish to balance the sweetness, which we like. I mean, we typically, when we brew ESBs or a lot of English malty styles, put a little bit of chocolate malt or bitter roast barley in there just to kind of balance that malty caramelness. But so
have you played around with a couple different roast barleys?
Yeah, we did.
In your findings,
used Brius roast barley for a long time. When we were all organic, it was like the organic roast barley choice. So, but then when we went conventional with our brewing, we experimented with a few different roast barleys, and we kind of landed on, honestly, this Simpson's roast barley is one of our favorites, but it is super dark. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Like it's almost double what the crisp roast barley is.
yeah.
Last time I was
think like the
comparing them.
range is 660 to 960 SRM or something. Like it's quite the range as well.
like,
But yeah,
blacker than black. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we like it in these small
How long did it
doses.
take you to get through those bags of roast barley at 1%? Some over multi-year process here.
Yeah, like so. I mean, we're about four brews per bag of roast barley for this recipe.
Okay.
Yeah, we're
Not too
brewing
bad.
like
Yeah.
around 16 tanks of Faceplant Winter is what we're projected to brew this year. So it's not a
Nice.
lot of roast barley,
Yeah.
but it's a pretty important actually ingredient in this particular beer. And then the carafe is special too. Like we just use it as more of a coloring, not imparting too much.
Yeah.
A little bit of flavor, but yeah.
Carafa Special 2 or Special 3 or all of those are pretty unique ingredients. The dehusked, I guess, kind of similar to like midnight wheat in some ways, but
Yeah. I feel like brewers are either like, are you a midnight wheat person or a Carafa 2 person?
Yeah.
Like rarely is there overlap for some reason. I don't know why. But
yeah, I mean, I like the Breeze catalog, like the Black Prince as well, like, and Midnight Wheat, I think are good dehusked malts, but like, yeah. For this one, we use Carafa Special 2. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned it already, but yeah, we just use a bit of Magnum for bittering. Like we do put a decent bittering charge in this just to like balance a bit of the sweetness, but it's just, I think it's in the mid 30 IBUs. It's not crazy. About 35 IBU. But yeah,
it's greatly balanced. Like it's nice and very sessionable.
It's like very. It comes like smells super sweet, like almost like a Tootsie Roll kind of like smell to it. Maybe that's just because it's Halloween now, and that's the candy that's still around. But it's like got that sweetness. But yeah, it's like it's balanced, not too sweet in the finish, where like I can have more, but and also not too dry. Like in a winter's day, like you want something with a bit more body. Or I find that I'm gravitating towards beers that have like more alcohol or more residual sugar in them for sure.
Yeah, I think it's important for this particular beer. Batches that dried out, we'd have customers be like, notice it and say, hey, there's something a bit different with this faceplant, and it'd be like, oh yeah, that one got away on us. So yeah, no, that's there was an issue though, like when taking the sugar out a little bit, we did have to contemplate, like we do like adding a bit of sugar into like our higher malt bill beers, just to like keep that free amino nitrogen down a little bit. But I mean, you guys have probably heard, like we've had a few beers tested through Raft Labs in Calgary, and just to see where our fan levels are at and like our higher gravity beers, and there is definitely something said about adding a bit of sugar into those beers. Too much fan can lead to fusel alcohols and like potentially some diacetyl, but the yeast we use in this beer is like kind of like the traditional NBC London Ale 2. Originally it was Y yeast 1028 yeast in all the English beers at Nelson Brewing Company, and it's a workhorse. Like it really cleans up diacetyl well, and we've never had noticeable diacetyl issues or problems with it. So but yeah, it was a definitely a consideration when we started taking the sugar out of the recipe.
We working with Raft, has it mostly been for fan analysis? Is it
and IBUs, to be honest, like that, like projects? We do a lot of hop dipping in like our hazies and stuff, and we're making quite a bit of assumptions on when we cool our wort down to 77 degrees Celsius what our utilization is of isomerase alpha acids. So we were doing it to get like a better idea of what our actual IBU was when performing those, and we were off. Turns out in some cases up to like 10 IBU off. On 10 IBU, we were 10 IBU over what we thought we were, which was interesting. So it helped us like perform better math when we're trying to calculate the utilization at those temps, which is nice. And now that we've like had those few beers tested, it's been a lot more consistent when we've sent a beer in. we've known the IBU. But yeah, it's just
Being able to hone it in further.
every once in a while. I usually try to like make a budget to send 2 beers off, like especially new beers, or if we think they're gonna have a place in our core lineup, just to see certain specs on it. But yeah, like IBU, we don't have an alcohol meter here, so I like seeing actual ABV on some beers, which is pretty interesting. Like what equation you use to calculate your ABV is important, and
yeah.
I just
What do you mean? Brewer's friend is not going to cut it?
Yeah, would you use the advanced formula or the regular formula, Darren? I don't know.
The one that gives you the number that I want.
Yeah, exactly. Or a nice medium between the two. But yeah. But that's been interesting too, because we've sent beers in where the math says it should be exactly where it's at, and in one beer it was, and then the next beer it's off by like not much, but 0.3 or 4% or something. You're like, oh, interesting, yeah, it's just more information is always powerful, but yeah,
and then the more questions, the more information you get, the more questions you have.
Exactly, the more confusion that follows.
100%. Knowledge is power. Crippling though. Yeah, I mean, you guys as Nelson Brewing have been around for like 34 years or something like that. Is there any beers that you'd like to like take from the archives and blow the dust off and like bring back, or is there one that like people keep asking for that like they brewed before your time or something like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say like our oldest legacy beer is the Blackheart Stout, and I'm very thankful it's still around. It like had a couple years break, but it's back, and it's honestly like in our tap room in the winter, it's the best seller. But so it's still around, and I'm very thankful for that, because I actually think it's like it's been heavily tweaked over the years, but it's I think a really good example of an oatmeal stout in a style I really like. But in terms of like old beers to bring back, one that I always really liked was the Old Brewery Ale. I don't know if anyone ever got to try that one, but it was like a pale ale.
It's the red label,
Red label. And, it was like out around the time Sierra Nevada Pale Ale was out, and like also using Cascade, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. Like, and seeing these old brewer's notes on the beer. Honestly, like having all these brewer's notes from 1991 sitting up in the lab, it's crazy. You can just see they're like acid washing the yeast every brew, and like it's just like some really old school stuff. It's really cool to see.
Yeah.
If you're ever by the brewery, it's worth like taking a look at, and you can just see like the handwriting just get worse over generations too, which is an interesting sociological experiment. But it's But the Old Brewery Ale, I don't know. I always felt that it should have been like Nelson Brewing Company's Blue Buck. Like it was just like a simple, really easy drinking pale ale. It had a really good nuance of like the old like Hallertau hops with Cascade, and I really like that pairing of like noble flavors and modern citrusy hops. And it just like wasn't too malty, but it had a bit of a malt backbone, like a balanced pale ale. No dry hop, all Whirlpool edition. But yeah, it was I thought a really solid beer, and there's lots of, depending on which department back in the day you asked, it was either the sales department's fault or the brewing department's fault. I didn't ever launch fully, but it had a really big following locally, and I don't know. I always loved it. We actually did bring it back for an anniversary beer one year, and it did okay. I don't think the general public was quite as excited about it as the brewers, so that may say something about my theory. So we did bring it back, I guess. But I always felt that beer was quite, I don't know, there was something kind of special about it that I think deserved a little bit more of like a BC Legacy brand kind of thing. But but yeah, like
when you brought it back, did it taste the way you remembered?
It did, and more importantly, like some old locals told me it tasted the way they remembered, because
perfect.
Perfect.
Yeah,
that's the best.
That was they were definitely the people I would trust the most, because they drank more of it back then.
I feel like those times whenever you make like you bring back a beer that hasn't been made in a while, or you like make a brand that is like local to a certain region and whatever, and then you have somebody come in and they're like, oh, this reminds me of like, it's that snapshot
No
of
doubt.
whatever memory they have. Yeah.
For sure.
That's that's always rewarding.
Yeah, it's like a nostalgic thing for people. It's really quite cool.
Yeah.
For sure. And beyond that brand, I'd say the one that I think I hear the most that people, I mean, it's hard to say because people want, every time you kill a brand, people are pretty upset about it. And we get lots of emails and,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, like, yeah, there's nothing you could do. Like our After Dark Brown Ale was a hard one to lose. I hear a lot about the Full Nelson double IPA. People asking to bring that one back, which was like a cool beer because of, I actually think Tessa touched on this in your last podcast, but like because the Nelson New Zealand hop program was all organic, we used quite a few of their hops. So it was like loaded full of Nelson Sauvin and quite like a malty double 8.2% IPA. But it was a pretty
Sweet.
balanced,
Oh, cool.
cool beer. Yeah, it was like
Yeah.
kind of an old school meets new school IPA. You don't see a lot of our new recipes with any crystal malt in them anymore. So like, but I do have an appreciation of like the balance that some of these beers actually really did achieve.
Yeah, and
that's fun.
Yeah, it's having them fresh. It's so good, right?
For sure.
Sure, you can get some oxidization from the crystal malt, but fresh off the tap, like out of the bright tank, oh, it's so good.
Yeah,
definitely.
Balance is so nice, right? Yeah, I do think that like we're going back to that a little bit. If that like balancing that super dry like IPA is like bringing that sweetness up a bit is like I think it's great, and I think it's starting to come back. People are appreciating that more for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah. So this was your team's first year in Yakima. Managed to run into you.
Yeah.
That was great. Pleasant surprise.
Always.
How was that experience? And how can, like, as brewers, better learn like from farmers' experience in agriculture?
Yeah, I honestly, I've done a lot of really amazing brewery trips, different CBCs and conferences over the years, but I would say the whole brew team, I mean, me and the three other brewers going down there together as a team, it was probably one of my favorite work trips I've ever been on, hands down, for various reasons. Like it's I didn't know how beneficial it would be, and it blew me away how worthwhile it was, and like how the whole POD project is like opening up to smaller breweries. Is I would suggest every brewery goes if they can, because it's well worth the experience. Getting a chance to like learn and teach and talk with your brew team about the hops and like understanding the hop oils, like I find it like really cool. You read about hop oil analysis and stuff, but actually get to go and do it and do the sensory and be like, this is what we're brewing with, and really think about it in terms of how it's going to like show up in your beer. Like you might be smelling something, you're like, oh, it's like woody, earthy, and it turns out it's high in myrcene content, but like that's not really going to come through. We got to look at the like, what is going to come through. And it's like, it's a really educating experience. The brewers were like extremely came out of that. I could just tell they're really reinvigorated and really passionate about it. And I think a lot of that's to do with connecting, we're such an agricultural product, to go see the farms, meet some of the farmers, do the tours. I've been lucky enough to tour a few hop farms before, but mainly in the Willamette Valley. We used to contract quite a bit of hops down there, and I went and visited some of the farms. But and I've been to like our malt house and a couple of our grain farms as well, actually, just because I was in the area, I wanted to see it. But all those experiences have just like, you really appreciate what an agricultural product this is we're producing, and this whole concept of like following your ingredients and where they come from. It kind of just makes you, I think, the whole team a little more proud to like brew with ingredients that they know where they came from, and also that they got to help choose. That's a new experience to me. I've never been able to be like,
Totally.
hey, I want that barley. Thanks, that looks good. We look at the COAs and
Yeah.
make sure there's no glaring
Yeah.
issues, but it's never had the like buying power to be like, I want that barley farm, please. So to go down there and have like some
Yeah.
selection over what you get to use and make an impact on your beer, learn about it. Yeah, I just thought the whole trip was awesome. And also it's like summer camp for brewers. It's all brewers down there, like it's it's pretty cool.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. You get to meet, people from you guys met each other or hung out down there, but you're meeting brewers from all over, at least the Northwest, and sometimes all over the world. Like when I was down there was brewers from the UK down on a special trip. That's so cool. You're right. You're like going down to Yakima, which if people don't know is a tiny town, kind of not close to anything. So that to get brewers out there, it really is like a summer camp. That's a good analogy, actually.
And I think it's really like we are so influenced by this giant hop growing region in the Northwest, and it's like I love pilsners and the diversity of all sorts of styles, but like I'm still a hop head. I love hops. I think they're fascinating. I'm so influenced by these hop breeding programs and what they're doing. The fact that like IPA 70% plus of the craft beer market, and you go and see Yakima and you kind of start to see like how big it is, how it actually is just, it's a hop growing mecca, the biggest hop growing region of the world. And it's for Nelson, we're not close to anything. And it's a 6-hour drive. Like that's pretty good. So to go down and see that and be like, wow, this is like, arguably why America is one of the new beer meccas of the world is because this is happening right here. And to go down and like be a part of it in any way is pretty, I don't know. Yeah. Pretty cool experience. And I don't know, it's pretty like, to throw a budget to go on that trip and then again get to influence what you're using this year. Like what a benefit of a work trip.
Yeah, it's almost hard to put a value to that, right? I mean, it's going to help your brand stand out, you hope, because you pick good hops, right?
Yeah.
And so like it's going to make the quality better. And I find that going with, like you said, you brought a couple other brewers down, like going with other people on your team, it helps to like unify everyone of like, okay, this is like what we want out of Citra. This is what we want out of Mosaic. Like for more experienced people, you say, okay, this is what we've selected in the past. This is how we usually select, and like we're looking for these notes, and we don't want these other like off notes, or maybe we actually don't want too much of this, or
for sure
we want some onion garlic or something like that, right? So I think that's always a good opportunity to like hone in on what you're after and get everyone on the same page too.
Yeah. And it gets complex. Like if you're using T90 and cryo in a recipe, you can be like, I actually don't want my cryo to smell exactly like my T90. Like I want there to be some complementary flavors there. And I don't know. It's you can really dive deep into it. And I love that you get to, the opportunity to like get all your team's opinions, graph it out yourself, and then see how it compared to like the wider opinions of multiple other brewers, and be like, okay, cool, we can smell stuff too. Awesome. Yeah.
Or we're completely blind to that aspect of it.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
That's valuable too, because I've learned like, oh, I do not get this thing, but then like someone else is super sensitive to that, like
for sure,
to that peach. Like I'm not getting peach at all. To me, it's like floral or something like that, and like you learn to like rely on people, and then you go back to the brewery, you're like, oh, like, do you get this and do you get that? Like that's cool too.
Yeah, totally.
What was your most surprising varietal?
Simcoe this year. Just like there was this one lot of Simcoe that hit the table that I just instantly like. We just kind of made our first order off the 24 crop year contract, and really excited to get some Simcoe in. It's I can't remember. I did take some notes, but I can't remember if it was like a cryo lot or a T90 lot that we smelled, but it just, in terms of like what hit the table and excited me the most that it was an option for us was one of the Simcoe lots. One of the new hops we weren't selecting for, but we have been spotting some is like what was 586 now Crush. It's probably one of the new varieties that I'm really excited about. I think it's a great hop. In terms of like, IPA hop.
And we just used it at Neighborhood to do fresh hop, and it turned out super cool. We dry hopped with pellets, but like super interesting hop. Definitely different than like some of the normal hits, like Citra Mosaic. It's got some really crazy flavors to it, but very, very nice and
awesome.
Like very bright and guava and like lychee, weird tropical things, but then kind of like cucumbery and watermelon too. I found, which at first I was like, this is not going to be good, and then it kind of pulled around the corner. I was like, okay, this is good. We're going to be okay here.
We picked up some melon notes from it as well when we used it, and we were like, oh, that's not exactly what we expected from it, but yeah.
I described it as like going into like you're in the mall and you like walk past the body shop. They have like all those lotions and stuff. It like smells like that store. It's like kind of like those like weird herbal cucumbery things, but then these awesome like crazy tropical sweet aromas as well.
That's awesome. Oh, that's cool that you did a fresh hop beer with it.
Yeah, it turned out nice.
So what Nelson beer is going to be showcasing that Simcoe?
Our Valhalla Hazy Pale Ale is, and our Benpol actually both carry Simcoe, but the Valhalla it's more notable, and I'd say
present.
Yeah, it'll be in the Valhalla.
So if you go pick up Valhalla, you'll know that Simon, that was his schnoz that picked that up.
Pretty excited. To be fair, the Valhalla does have like a few hops in it, but I'm pretty excited about all of them that are going in. But that's Simcoe this year. It's worth looking out for.
All the Simcoe lots this year were bangers. It was just like pick your favorite. So that was easy. It was a nice one to select, I thought.
Yeah. And speaking of Simcoe, we got to go to, I hope I have the name right, Perrault Farms. Is that correct? The birth of Simcoe.
Perrault.
Perrault.
Yeah, that was pretty good. That was a really cool tour.
Like one of the biggest hop farms, I think, down there. For
sure.
Yeah,
their processing facility was just, I've never seen anything on that scale before. It's quite wild to think that there's like multiple of those in the Yakima Valley.
Yeah, that's where we got our fresh hops from the last 2 years, and you're trying to like line up shipping with them. You're just like, please, can you ship this to us? And they're just this huge, like when you go down there, you're like, this is a huge operation.
Yeah,
we're just like this tiny brewery that's like, can you throw these in a bag and send them today?
And are they overnighting them to you, Darren? And or are they freezing them somehow? Or are they?
Yeah, we arrange our own freight and we overnight them to ourselves.
Okay,
so that
that's cool.
We can brew with it like as fast as possible.
Yeah.
The freight is absolutely insane.
Right, that's awesome.
We probably spend more on freight than we do the actual hops. That or we could go down there. I think we might just go down there next year.
It'd be cool to line it up to like hop selection and then drive back with some hops. I don't know how it'd be to bring it across the border, but
I'll have to ask Ross at Cannery because they did that this year.
Okay.
And they managed to do it, so that's
good to know.
But it's like that's a quick turnaround trip,
right?
Like yeah.
Yeah, they look at us CUNY kids kind of sketchy when we bring giant bags of green cones across the border.
That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, it wouldn't make it that obvious.
Yeah, right.
Exactly right. Yeah. I feel like it's almost worse to say it's an agricultural product, though.
Yeah, that's a good tip, though, that Ross did it this year. Because that would be really sweet if you could just line it up to your fresh hop beer.
Yeah. Go down, select, come back with a big truck full of hops, then brew.
Yeah. So 6-hour drive followed by 18-hour brew day.
Yeah, that's
nothing like it.
No doubt. Labor of love.
Yeah. So, in regards to the Canadian brewing industry, what excites you about it these days? And where do you think, as an industry, we can all improve?
Yeah. That's a good question. I mean, a lot of people will bring up that, and I highly agree that the caliber of beer is higher, and I think that's awesome. I think that's something to be like, but I don't know if that excites me more as like a professional brewer or as a like a beer consumer. It's like there's something to be. So what excites me, I'd say, like, is it's the thing that's always excited me about brewing because like we're kind of preserving this cool piece of history. We're part of an artisanal craft, but like the science is always evolving, and I think it's like I'm excited to see what new yeast strains pop out, and like um I'm not as purist as certain people about the like it having to be natural. Like I think if someone can hack a yeast strain to make things smell awesome, I think it's cool. Like I think I'd like to try that out.
Yeah.
I think naturally derived terpenes could have a really cool place in beers, as opposed to extracts that have traditionally taste kind of fake. I think all this is really exciting, and just like the amount of experimenting and products out there is just it's endless. It's like every year it's like I gotta like and I say this because we are conventional brewing now, so a lot of these are off the table completely to me before. So there's like this whole playbook of things to experiment with that I just think keeps it really exciting, and also is what keeps our brewers really engaged as well. Like if people who are into it, like little recipe tweaks. Everyone's excited to see what it does. Like that's a thing I think
Yeah.
professional production breweries have to like really appreciate. Like we did this tweak, let's do some censoring and see what we think.
Yeah.
Which is one nice thing about brewing core brands is that you can do that. But yeah, just to like try new
dialing in a core is pretty rewarding.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's very rewarding, and like so I'm excited about all the new products that are coming out. Like we're gonna do some bench trials next couple of weeks of the Euphoric stuff. We're gonna try it out, just see what we think, and but all that to me is exciting. I like the experimentation side of it.
Euphorics is the Haas.
Yeah, that's right.
Haas extract.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. They
Nice.
Yeah. So you need like we're doing it with like a pipette, and like that does it at like a 10 microgram scale to like do these bench trials. Like it's pretty small amounts, but anyways, it's a pretty exciting time. The science is always developing. But what else excites me about the brewing industry? I think sometimes with like hard times in the industry, like it also creates a push for initiative, and like people being creative on how to be efficient as breweries, how to keep the customer base engaged in a world of RTD drinkers and things. Like I think there's like as hard as no one loves hard times, but like there's some really good, there's positive that can come out of that too. If like, not to sound harsh, but like trimming some of the fat, like the people who are wanting to succeed and have their heart in it will, in my opinion. And I think that's also a positive thing about the industry being like a bit harder to work in. Yeah.
So
just
for
a way to like everyone to grow and like push, like naturally be pushed into these like harder situations, and hopefully turn into a diamond under pressure.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think the industry will be quite resilient, but it will force people to, you can't be just too, there's a time in this industry when it was booming where some pretty questionable products probably could still sell, and maybe that's just the subject of really good marketing or sales teams, I don't know, but I think now you have to have both. If you want to like produce beer to distribute, you need to have smart sales and marketing and great beer. So it's like and you have to figure out how to do it efficiently. Like since COVID, we've had to focus on efficiencies a lot. And at first that can be pretty stressful, being like, oh, efficiency. But like, it's also kind of exciting. Like, if you're like, hey, we're getting like way higher yields per brew, like that's a successful thing, and people can feel good about that, and it's
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah, it's nice. Like finding those things where you're like, oh, I like saved 100 liters per batch on this brew over a course of a year, and they're like, whoa, we actually brewed 2 batches less overall while producing the same amount of volume.
Yeah,
it all adds
Yeah.
up.
for sure.
For any new brewers just getting into the industry, do you have anything, words of wisdom or advice?
Yeah, I feel like I could rant about that for a long time. But yeah, I mean,
Buy good boots.
yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I mean, hopefully, I'm a very not your typical brewer. Like I've been at, well, if you not counting my high school, not really brewing experience, I've been at one brewery my whole career, and I think some brewers and ex-coworkers have been like, oh, like how do you feel about not moving around more? Like, do you feel like that stunted you? And I don't know, I don't at all. Like I feel like I had the access to so many other colleagues in the industry, collab brews, and I learned so much over the years, and I'm still learning. So I feel like if you find a good brewery that you like, it's nothing wrong with staying at it. If the business treats you well, I mean, that's something to be said. Or if you're starting your own business, I'd also say that I've told some friends before that like recipe development's awesome, and I'm definitely not trying, like I really believe in the grain to glass, like paying attention from your raw ingredients all the way to the finished product. Like having a recipe is great, like, but the fact is, like, executing a recipe is way different than having a good recipe. A lot of people can be like, hey, like I got this awesome recipe I wrote, but like actually executing it from every step of the process on probably not, depending on your brewery, a huge budget. So you can't just like throw money at fixing certain problems in your brewery. Creates a lot of problem solving.
Yeah.
And I'd say, so like seeing that execution from step to step, knowing that getting into the brewing industry, you're running, if you're in a head brewer role or becoming into any sort of managerial role, you're running a small plant. Like that's what we're doing. It's like, it's a small production facility.
Yeah.
And think about everything that entails. It's not just, looking handsome and brewing beer and, like telling people you're a brewer. It's cool, but like you're running a plant. I'd say like the hardest.
That just comes naturally after.
Yeah, well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just like, I'd say the hardest part about working for a brewery isn't always making good beer. It's managing people. It's how are you at that? How are you keeping your team engaged? Like we really pride ourselves at employee retention at MBC. Our lead brewer's in there for almost 10. Our second longest brewer's been there for 7, and I love that. Like how do you keep these guys engaged over the years? How do you, surround people that are like-minded and, but also diverse? I believe in collaboration. Like don't be scared of hiring smart people that will question you. Like I like people throwing out opinions, and I don't know. I would say, I guess, just know what you're getting into. It's not just about like banging out a sweet recipe, because
that'll happen naturally after.
Yeah,
for sure.
Just look it up online. There's lots of good ones out there.
That's it. Yeah, there's no shortage.
How good is your DO? That's the real question.
Yeah, and I mean, that's it. Like, I think that's stale beer is partially what's killing the industry a little bit. Like keep your DOs tight. Get a DO. I don't know. It's I know. Yeah, monitor those things. We did a big sensory beer panel on all our bunch of the top selling hazies in the BC market recently, and it was totally blind, and everyone just wrote down their notes and rated it. But like, it was really interesting how it just wasn't fair, because anything that was over 2 months, 3 months old, just like people picked up different things. Like the brewers were able to pick up oxidation pretty easily, but they still ranked really low on the majority. And this was like 16 people in the sensory panel. But like the only thing I really learned from it wasn't who had the best hazy in BC. Was old beer's tough. Like it's it's hard to keep it fresh.
Yeah.
All we can do is control how it leaves the brewery, and that's you kind of just and hope that your salespeople are keeping an eye on it.
I always remind remind my staff, I'm like, we're the only ones who get to drink it off the bright tank, and that's not necessarily what everybody else is getting
No.
100%.
down the road.
Yeah, I heard a brewer once say like he doesn't do sensory on his beer until it's 1 month old. Like with his brewers, like they do proper sensory because they figure that's the average time it takes to leave their brewery and actually hit someone's hand, which seems like a little bit long, but like to be fair, a lot of people are drinking your beer after a month, which is
yeah. They could buy it
sure.
fresh and then it sits in the back of their fridge or whatever. Give it to a buddy. Who knows? Yeah.
No, I believe like we try to taste our beer up until 6 months because that's when we like say it's good till, and then I mean at that point don't really.
Yeah.
Well, Simon, it's been great having you on the podcast, and a real treat for my young self to get to dive deep on the Faceplant Winter Ale. If people are looking to get this outside of the brewery, you can pick it up at the BC liquor store. It says seasonal listing, right?
Yeah.
Or if they don't have it, request to get it in.
Yeah, I got it in Penticton, no problem. The BCL.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. And if you want to support us and like what you hear, make sure to tell your friends about the podcast. Subscribe and follow on all the social accounts. Instagram at Why This Beer, and on Facebook as well. And of course, support Darren and I by buying neighborhood beer and Main Street Brewing where you can. Well, thanks a lot, Simon.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, guys.
It's been a pleasure.
A real treat.
Cheers.
Yeah, cheers.
Cheers.